I've worked with this one person for quite a while, and one of the things that I would say that he mm, needed to kind of get in touch with is anger, a lot of anger, and that's sort of like been a theme. And just watching, I emailed him a couple of weeks ago that I said the world is burning with anger. It's burning up with anger, isn't it? Where is there not anger, and where is there not almost malevolent, terrible anger? So it isn't as if it's a. We tend to think of our anger as like it's my anger, right? And it's but to some extent it's universal. It's everybody's anger. So, but anyway, I had for years, and I'm trying to be as impersonal in this description as possible, but for years, I really wanted to help this person experience his anger and acknowledge it and be aware of it, because a lot of it, he wasn't so aware of it. So over the years, he finally did get in touch with it. So at some point, I got to the point that, whoops, maybe, all right, that's good that you're in touch with it now. But he sort of like has given himself permission, like just to let it rip. And so that was just fine until, but recently he's had some difficult, quite difficult situation that, that anger would be quite obvious. And so I made the statement recently, and it was very funny. I said, maybe now it's time to control your anger, right? And his face winced. He didn't like that at all. I said, so I noticed you have like a little expression on your face, right? And he says, I said, what was it about what I said that made you like have that, like bad face? He said, well, you've told me for a long time that I should experience my anger and so let and feel it and all that. And he said, no, I've done that. And he said, so now control? He said, he didn't like that. And I said, so what is the problem with that? He said, I don't like that word, control. So we had a good time with that. We investigated that, I said, so you don't like that word, control? And he said, no. And I said, so what is it about that you don't like? And so I don't want to really just go too far with this, but it was really a fascinating investigation, and he's a very, very good and very intelligent. So he let himself sort of go into that. So what does control feel like? So I would just like to, so let's pretend that we're having a session here now, right, Beverly? What is it about control that you don't like? Or is there something about control you don't like? Is there someone that would say, don't try to control me, right? Many of us, I think, would have, if we really are in touch with that, we might find, and he used the word, he said, aversion and resistance to that word, control. So, I found that really very fascinating, and so then we started talking about, how do you deal with anger if you don't have some control over it? And he acknowledged that that sometimes the anger can be so large that it's like if it's going to be destructive, you do need to have a little control over it. So from that we went into this idea. So I asked him, so what about if you have this beautiful stallion? It's a beautiful horse, right? So how does that horse become like merged with the rider if there's not some element of control? And then I said, so what about taming? What about taming a horse? And he didn't like that at all. He didn't like control, but the word taming was even worse. He hated that word, taming a horse. And then we got into the whole thing of, if you tame a horse, do you break its spirit? So then at some point, as we went on. So it was a really wonderful conversation, and particularly because it's a wonderful and very intelligent person. So finally we got to this question. So I said, so what is it that doesn't want to be tamed? Now that was a good question for him. I mean, that really got him going. He said, So I said, what is it that is so resistant to that idea of being tamed? Because it's like, it may be true, that if we have anger that is really tremendously powerful and can be destructive, maybe anger has to be tamed in each of us. I would say probably, if you go with the Buddhism, greed, hatred, and delusion, all three need to be tamed. And if you say, well, I don't need to tame those because I don't have greed, hatred, or delusion. I don't have any of that, right? So then you can get out of it, right? So this was, he really went into that. And so I said, so just look inside. So what is it do you think that would be, that would be so resistant to the idea of taming? So he said, well, would be the child part of me? I said, maybe. He said, or the teenager part of me? Because, so we have this kind of a language that we've developed together, right? The various parts of the person. So anyway, so he finally arrived at, he said, could it be the ego? And I said, bingo. Bingo, ego. So I said, so then what is the ego? What is that to you, the ego? So then he started going again. I was very impressed with all of it. So we talked about the resistance to the ego being tamed, and he said that so then he was like going in the direction of like in Buddhism, the no self and the idea of getting rid of the ego. Can you get rid of your ego? And then I suggested, so what would it be that in you that would want to get rid of the ego? So that was a good question. And so then the answer we finally came up with is that the only thing that would want to get rid of the ego is the ego. The ego is extraordinarily clever, right? It's a very clever thing. It can just be anything that it needs to be in order to avoid taming. Oh, you need for me to be spiritual? I'll be spiritual. So I suggested to him that the ego's primary mission in life is to survive. It'll do anything to survive. It will do anything in the world to survive. And then I asked him, so why do you think it's so obsessed with survival? So my suggestion is that it's perhaps it can almost intuit that it isn't really real. It's so close to to the truth of the fact that it's a fabrication. I mean, if you were a fabrication, you would do anything to prevent yourself from knowing that. So we got very far along with this idea that there is some part of us that really is relentlessly focused on surviving, staying cohesive for what it is, So, I mean, because it's very, strange to say surviving, isn't it? Because, our body wants to survive, but how does the ego survive? The ego, right? How does it keep alive? How does it survive? So I wanted to just suggest to you all that, first of all, I really, I got so much out of that conversation with him. And again, so aware that we tend to be oblivious to how number one, how subtle the ego is, number one. Number two, how it will split off from itself and then say, well, I've got to get rid of my ego, right? I got to get rid of that, right? So it's an extraordinarily difficult task to, again, have this kind of quiet, willingness to just look, without trying, without, like saying, I've got to get rid of my ego, because again, that's just the ego talking to itself. This willingness to just look and to see it, to see the way it rises up, to see the way it continually rises in thought. It's the only place it is going to exist. It's in your thought, in my thought, right? As I'm thinking and thinking and thinking, whatever I'm thinking, there will be that solid sense of me that's embedded in the thought. So what am I supposed to do? Say, well, you're not real. That would be the thought talking to itself. You say, what the hell are you going to do, right? It's like you can't attack yourself. You can't attack your ego. It's impossible, because all it will do is split off of itself and then say, well, you're. But all you can really do is develop this extraordinary capacity to kindly watch and not get seduced by your own or my own ego. And I suggest to you that that's what we're trying to do here. And so I was sitting, Tuesday we were here, and we were all sitting together, and as we were sitting, came the thought, wonder who knocked the head off that Buddha at the door. Who did that, right? Now that feels very real, doesn't it? Doesn't that feel like, that's very real? I mean, somebody said, well, that's my ego, right? But I mean, it's very, and not only that, but then the next thing is that, the next thought was, well, they should pay for it, right? They should replace that, well, I should discuss this with Travis. So maybe we should buy a new Buddha and give them a bill, right? Well, then, so that feels normal, right? It feels real. Do you see how hard that is? Do you see how difficult that is? I mean, do you or not? I mean, I do. It's like it's so damn real. I mean, so what is wrong with saying, well, wonder who knocked the Buddha's head off, right? I mean, right? And then, well, they should really replace it, right? So it's extraordinarily difficult to have this quiet mind that recognizes this victor that just solidified in that moment, right? In that moment, it's totally, totally real. And it's not unreal. I mean, it's real in the moment. Anything, but the fact is, how lasting is it? If it don't last, it ain't real. That's what the old Chinese teacher said, right? I mean, if it won't last, it's whatever it is, it's not real. And so that's to some extent your key to what is real and what is not real. Our chant is lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, right? From the fear of death to the realization of deathlessness. So anyway, so for me, I'm sitting there and so, well, wonder who knocked the Buddha's head off. I mean, we could get really into that, right? I said, well, it's very unthoughtful. But then, so then I could really come back and say, oh, well, there you are, Victor. There you go again, right? You're lost in thought. That's just ego talking to itself. It's so hard, right? Because even then you apply the practice, right? I mean, thinking, right? Well, who's noting thinking? You got a clue who's noting thinking? It's this illusion that there is this solidified victor. So the only solution to that conundrum is this quiet observation of a sense of self rising. It's rising, and it's going to be falling. It's going to disappear, and there's nothing you can do with it but just watch it rise and watch it fall and watch it rise and watch it fall. That sense of self solidifying. That's the closest that I can come to the taming. I mean, if I'm fighting it or putting it down, or if I'm doing anything to it at all, it's got to be ego. It has to be, because the ego only understands doing. It doesn't understand anything else. I'll do this. I'll solve this. I'll be good. I'm going to be a good. I'll be a bad. It doesn't matter. Right? So all we can really do is develop this, aspiration to kindly watch. Just that's all you can do is kindly watch. So, so in the conversation that we had, this was sort of like my suggestion again, that so what is the ego? And so it was a wonderful conversation. The willingness, his willingness to sit with me and both of us to try to say, well, what is this? What is the ego? Because the minute you put it into words, you've solidified it. Number one, it's so hard. So just think about this ego. What is ego? That's a word that we have reified now. It's no longer real. So what it really is something that you feel inside that wells up as me, right? That's all you can do. It's me. And you can't put it into a word. You can't solidify it. But as you can feel this me rising up, you don't do anything with it, and you certainly don't make it bad. And I say, and there's this is not original to me. In that process, it softens. And in that process, it becomes more transparent. And in that process, it becomes more amenable to letting go of grasping. I'm watching the clock. So I have this amazing quote that I wanted to share with you all. It basically has nothing to do with anything. I mean, it does, but I mean, like in my, I thought I was going to be able to tie this all in together brilliantly. So I'm not going to attempt to. Everything in our culture, so Christianity and Buddhism, everything, if you think about it, and particularly, no, I'm not. I was going to say particularly Christianity. I'm not going to say that. Everything, civilization has been from the beginning about trying to tame us. From the beginning. What's Christianity? Right? I mean, it's really about, I mean, look, through the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church, I mean, they controlled everything, for God's sakes. The Catholic Church controlled everything. It controlled what you did, how you thought, right, all the way into the age of reason. But really, if you, Buddhism, I think that Buddhism gave people a little bit more room in a way. It was kind of clever, but they're both about taming the human heart. They're both about taming, and of course, in the West, you have to say probably Christianity was more stupid in a way as opposed to Buddhism, because Christianity got so restrictive that we finally broke away from it. Right? So no one has. Have you ever read about people breaking away from Buddhism? I haven't. I mean, it was able to contain people in a certain way, in a way that Christianity really forced people to create. And science, the age of reason, actually is the way we broke away from it. So this is just blah blah blah, and you don't have to agree with any of it. But I do think that it is true that we have up until now, religion is about trying to tame the human spirit, the human heart. And how's it working out for us? All right? Well, I guess Dr. Phil would ask that, wouldn't it? How has religion been working out for us, taming the human's heart? I mean, clearly, it's a fairly big failure. I mean, and I would say go to from Tibet to any, think about it, like Tibetan Buddhism. But I mean, it doesn't matter where you go. It hasn't worked. It clearly hasn't worked. And so, so this is why, going back to that, I mean, I loved that conversation with this young man, because really what we were talking about is a kind of wildness inside our hearts that has no interest to being tamed. He just has no interest in being tamed. You know, I mean, you can suppress it. You know, you can have oppressive parents that oppress it. You can have a oppressive culture that oppresses it. You can have, but it just will. You can't suppress it. It'll just pop out, and all of it split off in a million different ways. All you can probably do is, or all you can do, is recognize its wildness and aspire to some sort of way of taming it through love. Thoreau said, the only solution to the problem of love is to love more. I love that. That is so wonderful. So I guess, so we're, do you think, ask myself this question, although there's no one here, do you think there's some part of you that needs to be tamed? Or are you just absolutely right, free, so free? Because, you know, if you are free, in paradoxically speaking, right, a free spirit is a tamed spirit. Who would believe that? That's pretty absurd, isn't it? That doesn't make any sense. If you're tame, you're free. But forget that. I just put that in there just as a lot of, like to kind of like put sugar on the coffee. Is there some part of you that is untamed? You know, I think it's an extraordinarily important question, you know? And so, like, if you have been tamed since you were a little girl or a little boy, then there's some part of you that would say, well, I want him to I came up with a very, very bad phrase, blank you, but I didn't say that, and so you can delete it. Well, we're not going to put this on the YouTube. Yeah, I think it's extraordinarily difficult because I think some people feel tamed or beat down. Some of us do, you know. I mean, life can have beat us down in many ways, and so that it's like it's not even. It's almost not like a real question, but this practice is about some possibility of taming, and what it's also paradoxical. What is tamed becomes a master. You know, like a master teacher you read about the Chinese Chan teachers. They were called masters. Right? So the master of your mind. If you have mastered your mind, you are tamed. And paradoxically, you are free. So I would just like to suggest to you that if you think that you don't have a little bit of a wild heart, you're probably not being so honest with yourself. You know, the wild heart is only known in the thoughts. When you go home and close the door and walk into your own house, right? No one's looking, right? No one's looking wherever you are. So you walk home and you walk into your house and walk into your bedroom or walk into your kitchen. And then that's where we know whether it's tamed or not. Right? I'd like to kill that son of a bitch. Or whatever, right? You know, Donald Trump, blank. Obama, blank. Hillary Clinton, blank. Those stupid Republicans, blank. The Chinese, blank. I mean, it's endless. It is endless. How many times would you walk in, you know, and close the door and walk into the kitchen or the bedroom or the bathroom, and just the mind is just full of loving thoughts? Raise your hand. Just raise your hand, right? just full of loving thoughts, just endlessly flowing loving thoughts. May all beings be happy and safe from harm. That's a free and tamed mind. And if we're not doing that, then the odds are there's something that is not quite tamed. And so does anyone think that I'm presuming to sit here and say that? Come on. I mean, I have had this like wild child since the day I was born. It's like he's not been tamed. I've worked some point with that child for a long time. But it's our task on earth. Christianity hasn't done it, and Buddhism hasn't done it. It's like a new religion that you have to figure out for yourself. So I'm going to read this to you all, and like I say, it doesn't really it doesn't have anything to do with anything. This was written by Thoreau, actually 100 in his journal, 150 years ago. It was the 27th of August, 1859. What's the day?
29th of August, 2015.
So go back to the 27th. He wrote this in his journal. And as I read this, someone sent this to me because I was reading Thoreau 2 weeks ago. So someone here sent it to me, and so I as you all know, I'm always been extraordinarily interested in the difference in the psychological and the meditation. And so paradoxically, I think this is one of the more profound psychological statements I have ever read. And so I'll just read it to you. He wrote on the 27th of August, 1859, he said, "All our life, i.e. the living part of it," I like that, "all our life, the living part of it, is a persistent dreaming awake. The boy does not camp in his father's yard. That would not be adventurous." And we're talking about a little wild part of us. That would not be adventurous enough. There are too many sights and sounds to disturb the illusion. So, so camping in his father's yard, the illusion, he'd hear his father or his mother. So he marches off 20 or 30 miles and then pitches his tent where strangers inhabit and are tamely sleeping in their beds, just like his father at home. And he camps in their yard. So he's gone 20 or 30 miles away from home, right? And he camps in some stranger's yard, right? But they're all asleep, right? And now he's like, so he's camping there. And then he says, but then he dreams uninterruptedly that he is anywhere but where he is. So I won't explain that to you all. So he moves away from, right, he wants to camp out, or she wants to camp out right at home. But you don't want to camp too near your parents, because that doesn't feel adventurous, does it? Right? So you say, okay, I'll go down the road 20 miles or 30 miles. So you go down the road and you camp out. And then it feels as if you're far away from home, right? And so then, because everything's kind of like it's tame and everything. So what he's describing that this person has never left home, and perhaps never will, because they're just carrying that with them, right? That connection to their parents. So that's like we have not individuated, which is the Jungian term. We've not really left. We're still camping out close to home, right? And it could be on the moon. It could be 3,000 miles from here, but we're carrying all of that in us. Home is still inside. Whatever it was to us, whatever our parents were to us, our grandparents, We're still walking around with it. We have not become independent and free inside. We're still camping out, right, pretending that we're away from home. So I think that's extraordinary. I've never read something as clear in a definition of what true individuation is. True individuation is where you have really created your own tent away from home. So I just wanted to share that with you. It describes to me how profoundly difficult it is to truly separate and to truly be in our own little world that is a world of freedom and liberation from even the culture, from the father's home could be Buddhism, it could be Theravada, it could be Vipassana, it could be Christianity. Right? Just think about it, with all of the power of our culture. So I just want to ask you again, and then I'll shut up. Is there any part of you that needs to be tamed? Does any part of you need to be tamed? Or not? And I think that your journey starts from right there. From right there. That's where each of us are journey. I don't need to be tamed. I'm fine and dandy just the way I am. And leave me alone. So we'll sit now.